great question. My name is Alex Fleming. I'm your host, and with me today is Mike Fallek. I didn't ask you how you wanted to be introduced, Mike, so this is just how it's happening. You're an artist, an animator, a podcaster, and an all-around good guy.
I think all-around good guy. That's what I want to be introduced from now on. Yeah, I like that. I podcaster. I mean, animator, documentarian, all those things. It's like, that's a part of my skill set, but
Podcaster, is that your main class? Is that if you were Super Smash Brothers?
Yeah, but I play the Smash before. I don't like Smash. That was another game that I sold that I got a bunch of good games for. I think I sold my copy of N64 Super Smash for $80. And I was rolling in. Yeah, it's one of those games that everyone has in their collection and they just hang on to.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't play that game. I don't invite people over to play Smash ever. And if I did, it would definitely be online or on a newer system. So bye-bye. Hello, a bunch of Genesis games.
Okay. Interesting. So I couldn't help but hear, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. You have a couple podcasts, and one of them I've been listening to, you were talking about old video game systems.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help but think about this, because I want to talk about this because I feel like we're coming from different places, but arriving at a similar location where I love old video games too, but I've been playing a lot of Super Smash Brothers. I didn't do vocal warm-ups today, so that's on me.
I did many. Now my vocals melted.
So I've been playing Brawl a lot, and it is the maligned stepchild of the Super Smash Brothers universe. It just happens to be the one I have because it's for Wii, and that's the system that I have. But I've been playing Pikachu. I've just been training against computers as if someday my college hall is going to reappear and I need to be ready in case we all need to fight or something.
For me, here's what I would do. I've said this before publicly. I studied martial arts for years. I would take lessons if there was a Super Smash or definitely Street Fighter. I would for sure, without a doubt, show up Wednesdays at 7 and let's do warm-ups and let's all do Super Smash class together. I would do that in the same way I took martial arts class because I want to be taught by people who know how to fight. I don't think that fight language is something you just inherently learn on your own. I do think it's a puzzle. I do think it's a puzzle. There's no way. I don't think it's a puzzle that you can solve on your own. Fight language in any martial arts, which I consider Street Fighter and video game fighting games, esports, to be a valid martial art. I don't think you just learn that. You get taught techniques. You get taught techniques of fighting. And so, I just genuinely, I liked board the platforms and shit in Super Smash. Can I curse?
Yeah, you can curse. This is labeled explicit. Okay. Let me stop you there. So when you're saying fight language, I'm immediately getting interested. I've never heard that term before. I mean, language... it's a form of magic, right? It's how you express your will into the world and communicate with others. What is fight language?
The people call it the sweet science, and there's all sorts of terms for it. But the idea that there's this myth that goes around fighting, which is that you're not doing pre-prescribed techniques. There are methodologies for every situation you're in. The classic one that people say, we'll talk about that's stupid is Napoleon Dynamite, where it's grab my wrist. And we've all known guys like that take a class and okay, if you grab me here. But it does kind of work that way. I mean, move to the outside of your opponent is one. You circle to their jabbing hand. It's a sort of classic one that people know about in order to put them on the outside of your back. These are things that you're learning over time. And to me, you can't just intuit that stuff. You need to speak to somebody who knows the language and knows what to do. In fencing, there is no moving to the outside. You're on a straight line. So you have to learn a new language in every sport. In Tekken, moving to the outside is fake, right? You're not actually getting an advantage by moving in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion. That's something they took from fighting, but they got rid of the idea that you could put someone to your back, which is a safer area than the front of your body. It's all languages in itself, which is why video game fight language is valid.
So is Is this tactical language? Is this something that that goes across video games and MMA and those sorts of fighting?
Yeah. Every fighting sport has rules, and therefore every fighting sport has its own language in order to operate in it. So a lot of times it's this thing like boxing, for example. A lot of people watch boxing, and then when you learn about boxing, you're like, oh, wow, I guarantee the guy next to me doesn't really understand. Him or her doesn't really understand what just happened in that because they don't know the language. Something very impressive. The rope-a-dope is the classic example of understanding fight language. Muhammad Ali leaning against the ropes looks like he's losing, but he's letting the guy hit his arms, which is no points, which means he's just doing neutrally while taking a rest off of his legs. So if you don't understand boxing, I could show you someone who has no idea who Muhammad Ali is and show him leaning up against the ropes and getting punched in the arms. He's not losing any points. Floyd Mayweather did the same thing with letting people hit his back using the back block. It looks like he's getting punched. He's not. He's blocking. So it goes across all things, this fight language. And if you don't get it, you don't understand. I once said when I did a fight anime, I was very into fight animation. You can hear that on #Gold. But I once said, your inability to understand why something happened in the fight is not my inability to understand that that's the thing that should have happened.
Can you
that's
unpack it a little bit? What do you mean by that?
If I show you a very fast piece of footage and you don't understand who dodged, who made the right move, who is actually in a dangerous scenario and got themselves back out, who what they're actually trying to achieve by moving and punching, you're just watching stuff. You're not really understanding the language. So my ability in knowing one type of martial arts, which doesn't mean I know all of them, I don't understand street fighter martial arts, as in the game, not like
you don't. There's a whole world of mechanics depending on the game. Like, is there blocking? Are there special moves that have range? There's all sorts of different things. You talked about whether or not you can move in 3-dimensional space, or if it's truly a 2D plane. If there's a sidestep things. I mean, these are all
getting power ups would be the best way to translate it. Like, is that person doing that move, which looks less impressive, in order to get their meter full? I know a lot of people don't play with those special meters, but like, those are ideas that, like, let's say, for example, I do a very impressive move, and I sort of like block you and kind of run away, right? And I get out of the way. Well, there's a thing called ring dominance, which is sometimes used in boxing, where it's like, oh, that person it's used a lot in boxing commentary. That person is dominating the ring. So even though it looks like you dodged and got away, a judge might be like, oh, actually, or a commentator might be like, you're not really controlling the ring.
Right.
So
the closest I can think of is like maybe in like a hockey game when they're just trying to put shots on goal, and is that sort of a similar tactic of just trying to occupy the space?
Right. That statistic is similar. Shots on goal is similar to like
to
ring
controlling.
Dominance.
I mean, yeah. If I think
it
about
doesn't indicate that you're winning, it indicates that you're achieving something. And so, like, unpacking that statement one step further, not to interrupt, but like,
Please.
Essentially, a street fighter is going to know a Street Fighter Alpha. Like, they're watching that game and they're like, what happened in that fight? Why did you lose? I don't know. I don't know what's going on in that game. It's so complicated and they are so good at it. And especially with the length of the animations and all those different things, to say that I watch a game and understand what's going on like that is, it's BS. You don't. And so to watch a boxing match and to understand, I talked about moving to someone's jab hand.
Mm-hmm.
If you manage to get inside into someone's body, that's a very dangerous area. Being in that area and not getting hit is impressive to me, but you may not see it as impressive.
Because you don't know the risk if you don't of that area,
you don't
for example.
That language. Yeah, exactly. So it's fight language and all those different things is about like actually being aware of it. So why I don't care about Super Smash and all those different things is because there's no masters to learn from. I mean, there's videos and stuff, but that's not really how martial arts coaching works. And so I see it. This is another area. I was just on a podcast. It was like, this is another area where no one's putting the legitimacy into the martial art itself. No one is saying, this is my school of fighting Street Fighter. I am a teacher. My students will fight like me and use my tactics. I don't know why we're not putting the legitimacy into esports like we do into regular sports. This came up in a podcast where I was like, why there isn't a library for old games so I'm not forced to pirate them if I can't afford the system is it's classist.
You talking about
Only,
abandonware here?
yeah, or what do you call emulators and all those things? Like it's classist and like totally elitist to be like, well, if you can't afford to play those games, you have to steal them.
Or buy a $300, Shintendo Classic reboot system of like these new ways to resell old materials that keep coming up. Or you can't buy it on the Wii store anymore. You got to buy it in the new digital download store. There's always ways to make you rebuy.
In film, which has never been questioned as art. It was a very short period of time, but for a long time now, it was never been questioned as art. When the Lumiere brothers were like, showing whatever, and Edison having people sneeze and taking their bras off in like Nickelodeons and stuff. Like, yeah, maybe that was not art. But since then, it's been a long time, and we have film preservation libraries. We give access at libraries to kids who can, like if you are anyone who can get a library card, you can watch classic films. You cannot be a poor kid and learn about classic games without putting yourself in legal risk.
Yeah.
So it's this crazy thing where it's like we need someone putting legitimacy into video games in all areas. Esports are sports. But yet you don't see someone being like, learn Street Fighter at my school. I am a champion. I'm this champion. I'll teach you how to fight. There's something going on there.
Okay, so I want to pause just because there's this documentary. I'm not saying like it's the greatest documentary of all time, but I thought it was really interesting. I want to say it was called The Smash Brothers. Have you heard of this?
No.
It was about the top Super Smash Brothers Melee players and the various cults of personality that formed around them. And there's definitely some criticism for just the fact that it was like, a heavily male-dominated space full of really young kids in the early 2000s, and without a lot of supervision. But the sort of schoolification of the fighting was something that I thought was very present and very interesting. Is that there's one of the guys, Ken, goes on to be a Survivor player, which I've been watching a bunch with my wife Corey, and we're like, oh, that's the guy from the Super Smash Brothers documentary. The schools of thought are not necessarily like full arts or anything. It's, I guess, more around the characters of like a Marth player. But there was, I believe, when I was looking him up, there's like a Ken combo that was named after him, which I don't know the particulars of that fight language, but there's some kind of language there. And I think what was particular about that Super Smash Brothers Melee and this moment that the documentary captures is that they broke the game in a way the developers did not intend. Mm-hmm. Nintendo specifically wanted people to not be able to be that good at the game because it would drive away casual fans. And they found out how to do these like wave dashes, and I think there's another term that I'm blanking on right now. But it brought their gameplay to another level. And they also have their own system that was different than usually play Smash Brothers. There's like items that appear, and it like makes it a little bit less skill based. And so it was the sort of classic Final Destination 4 stock. Like they had a code that they created, and if you didn't play in that way, it wasn't the real game. But it's interesting how these different rituals metastasize around these different groups of play and how things kind of calcify. So that's just, I think, an interesting phenomenon and where I got back into Super Smash Brothers from, because it was definitely an important game to me in my youth. But I want to switch gears a tiny bit, because we're talking a lot about video games, but I want to know with fighting and martial arts and all this stuff, there's usually like a philosophy, there's some kind of worldview that's attached to it. I don't know the details. I'm maybe being too glib as a Westerner who just kind of sees the cliches. But I does that apply in video games? I feel like it does, but it just hasn't necessarily been given hasn't been named properly yet in some ways. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I've practiced Western and Eastern, even that's sort of honestly racist. martial arts. I've practiced from England and Russia is where fencing sort of originates. I practice Taekwondo, which is from Korea mostly, although it has its origins in other. It's more muddled. A lot of martial arts are muddled, but it's Korean for the most part. And I practiced under a Korean master lineage, and I practiced Tai Chi, which is Chinese, and yoga, which is Indian in nature, and a little bit of Kung Fu, but not enough, and boxing, which is, of course, in a large part, my grandfather's style of boxing, which is an American style. So that's to answer your question and to say, like, is there a philosophy to martial arts? I think I would hesitate to find anyone other than the yoga cult I had a brush-in with push a martial art philosophy on me ever, and to make that a part of the culture. When you're really studying it, it is more about a universal idea of controlling your body. And the themes that come up are more things like relax your shoulders is something that's more of a universal theme to martial artists than some idea of Shaolin Chi or whatever. It's that's something that's more universal, the correct posture, the movement of the hips. When it comes down to it, there's these minute things. And I think that the philosophy of it is something that we don't get across the board, not just in America, people don't get, which is that your mind controls your body. And someone who is good at something with their body is very mentally fit. And they are very wise, even if they can't write a book, which a lot of them can. That's the thing that we don't always get in philosophy too, is like, it does not preclude you. One skill does not preclude you from another. I think there's a lot of bullying towards people who are weaker physically for whatever reason. And I'm even being ableist saying that, there's a lot of negativity towards people bullying people who have less physical strength in some specific way. And so over time we've said, well, if you're physically strong, you're not mentally fit. No way. Even just learning the sequence in a Tai Chi thing, like memorizing that, is a crazy amount of stuff. And then considering the scrutiny you're being put under, there's this thing of like, that the mental thing is some philosophy of life. The mental thing is like, do this action. Can you do this action? Can you do it exactly the way that you're supposed to do it? I think that do this action and do it exactly the way you're supposed to do it applies incredibly. Now, there's a cultural thing. There's a cultural thing to all of this stuff. Like, and I'm just going to ignore it for a second because that isn't how it's transmitted now. There obviously are cultural differences between how I learned it and other people, and the loyalties and all those different things that does change over time. It definitely belongs to that native culture. But if you're going to talk about the spreading of martial arts and understanding it and learning the history is important, but like, I think that you have no more, essentially, if you look at a video game, time is passing by and you have to press 0 or 1. There's nothing more exact and do the right thing than that message. And I think that you need to start allowing the culture to build and allowing that philosophy to like, of the preciousness of it is, I think, more important. And you have to understand in being in the culture, how important it is to people. And that's very present in video games. Definitely. People get crazy over their. People, they sell shower curtains with video game characters on them. That's crazy. I know that seems normalized, but if your shower curtain has Mario on it, he must be really important to you.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting the way that these pop culture icons become idols that we worship at the feet of. I'm not even necessarily criticizing it, or little totems in some way, but just you got to collect all of your various symbols of power, and they make you feel better.
I think that over time you'll see video games taking the place that I know right now in our culture we sort of equate video games with, martial arts with spirituality in a way that we think we could never achieve. I think that you will start to see video games take that place.
So is that just like a racist pop culture TV thing that I think of, like the Karate Kid, and that's what martial arts mean, or
Well, the word martial art is a Western word, so let's start there. That's an English word.
okay.
But you have to the racist part is that there is no such word as martial arts. Take karate, you mentioned. Karate and taekwondo have belt systems in it. Those are meant to be there's two, and the belt is a perfect example to how to understand the divergence of the philosophy. Belts represent one thing. There's black belt philosophy, which is the idea that the belt holding up your outfit, whatever it may be, would turn black from sweat. And therefore you were a master who had been studying quite a long time. But then there's the fact that karate and Hapkido is another one, I believe. And I don't know this much about Hapkido. I know karate and taekwondo are mimicking the martial system of ranks, private, lieutenant, sergeant. That's sort of the purpose of the belts nowadays, being subservient to the person that's a higher belt to you, which could be problematic, but it creates a cultural understanding of this was at one time used to train soldiers. Mm-hmm. And so you have those two divergences there. You have the idea that Shaolin monks were monks, and they developed the Shaolin style, which is really important. They had taken the Shaolin order, the Gong Fu that we know it, where you do like an order, from Ashtanga Yoga, where you did a sequence of things. So you have spiritual. Then Shaolin turns into a source of war training outside of the monkhood. And now that comes into Gong Fu in like the Chinese system, not a spiritual system. That's not a spiritual thing, although it sort of would have been at the time, because of the way they viewed country and all those different things. So to just say that there's martial arts and there's a philosophy that goes around with it, that's the only racist part you're saying, is to say you have to look at where does karate go? How does it start? Where does it end up? Where is it today? And that's the sort of the idea of the cultural importance of it, its origins and things like that. Certainly there's people that do yoga and don't have any spiritual connection to it. I would say, as someone looking at martial arts, I don't think you need to, but there could also be someone being like, no, that's the whole thing for me. And to be considered a part of those discussions is what mastery allows you to do. And I'm not a yoga expert at all. I'm not any expert in all these things. I've just done it and studied it. But I don't get to make a vote. Whatever the masters say, whatever the people practicing it say, whatever the important characters in it say, that's who gets to dictate the importance of those things you're talking about. Because if that's vital for me to understand how to move my body, remember at the core of it is body movement. Mm-hmm. If that's vital to understand it, if I can't understand how to do it without understanding the spiritual element, then that's important to that master. But if it's not important, then it's not important. And that's kind of where you have to look at it. Could you have learned karate, just wanting to learn karate, or Gong Fu is a better example. Could you have just learned Shaolin Kung Fu back in the day? No. You had to be a certain person. You had to understand the laws of the land. Now that's opened up. Now we just transmit these things. That's a big deal. What that means is up to the practitioners.
That's interesting. My first reaction is to think about something like Kabbalah, where it was secret because there was a context for it in belief and in a place, and now it's something you can access on Wikipedia, and not to say that there isn't value in the content also, but that it is then stripped of its context, and that changes the meaning.
I don't know. It's even growing up being raised in that, I did not. I only knew Kabbalah, like you're even saying it better than me. But you Hanukkah too. I Hanukkah. You Hanukkah, don't you?
I talked about this. Well, I took Hebrew for years in high school as my foreign language requirement, which was due to some stuff I don't know if I should truly unpack. I was just I didn't want to learn Spanish, and because I learned it several times. Taking the same 101 class in California after moving. And so I was like, no. I'm going to learn Hebrew. I'm going to get really into it. And then I did Birthright, right after the summer I graduated from college, and there was this. I just talked about this in an episode that's going up today, actually. But there was this guy from Michigan who was super acid fried in Tzvat, where they took us to, telling us about how Hashem named all of the things, and like he explained Kabbalah to me as the process by which God created the universe, like understanding the mechanics of creation, and then using that, because the mechanics of that are that God named stuff, and by naming the thing, now it exists. And so if you take that context, then the Hebrew language.
Didn't Adam name stuff?
Adam named some of the stuff, but God named Adam. He named he named heaven and earth. He named all the things up to that.
Okay.
That's where Adam shares in the godliness, is he gets to name things. He has the power of creation.
Speaking of which, if the name of this episode isn't Acid Fried in Tzvat, I don't know what we're doing. That's the best thing I've ever heard.
I will mark that down. And okay, so a bunch of things came up, because there's a lot of, I feel like one of my modern connections to a lot of this arcana is through video games. Like in Magic the Gathering, I had this like PlayStation Magic the Gathering title back in the 90s, and there was a villain named Tzvat, though, that was like the weird occulty witchy woman. I just thought it was cool to be like, I recognize that. But yeah, so naming is super important. I'm trying to remember exactly how I got onto this also. The other thing I just kept thinking of, though, is when you're talking about the different martial arts stuff, I was like, the only reason I recognize several of these names is because I had the GameCube Mortal Kombat game, and the big selling point was we mocapped a bunch of real martial artists.
Yeah.
And like you could switch styles mid-game, and I thought that was really cool. I don't know if I learned anything from it, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, because in modern days we don't. It doesn't apply as much anymore, this idea of fighting styles, but it's very interesting. I mean,
I think it should. I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's interesting because we still fight, and like the conflict is still a daily part of public discourse and life. But it doesn't. I do agree that it doesn't feel like it's in the air. Like no one's talking about Sun Tzu, but we are talking about politics all the time.
Yeah, I being in martial arts, Sun Tzu, a lot of creepy dudes are the guy in America. It's like only I read Sun Tzu, but I'm not the guy who's read Sun Tzu. If that makes sense. And I've read the Five Rings too. These are all things that people try and tell you. And I read Machiavelli. I read all this stuff, and like it's not. When you compare styles of fight and things like that, like this is again where it's super arbitrary, and like philosophy doesn't come down to a lot of it. You know, if we're on Jewish stuff while we're on it, you know, Krav Maga is not a martial art. It's a true martial art in the sense that it's only applicable for deadly self-defense, which is the origin of martial arts, but it's not a martial art anymore in how we define it. Krav Maga guys will tell you that. This is not for beauty. This is not for technique. This is a philosophy. Krav Maga is possibly the closest to the ancient martial arts that we talk about. There's a philosophy, there's a life-saving thing here, and there's an attitude you need to practice it, which is control of fear is a big part in Krav Maga.
Interesting.
I had done an interview for a documentary that I never finished. I was way over my head. I was too ambitious about Dragon Ball Z. And I had spoken to a few martial arts experts because the theory was that Akira Toriyama was what was called a genius. I read this book by this guy, and he had written about. I don't want to name drop him here, just in case he doesn't want me to. But he wrote a book, and he said that genius. The definition of it was that like the ideas ran through you, and then Akira Toriyama, who really didn't know a lot about martial arts, like intuited a lot of stuff about martial arts, and that he was a genius and didn't really understand a lot of these things that would connect with people. But I interviewed a Krav Maga guy, and he was like very much, you know, this is not for prettiness. This is for effectiveness. It's you know, all these really definitive statements about it. Chief of which is, I think sometimes they practice with shoes on, Krav Maga.
Really?
Which you don't practice with in regular martial arts.
Yeah, I've never. I mean, I've seen some martial arts. I've never seen a shoe before. It seems like that would really hurt.
Standard issue for war. So it's generally we give our soldiers shoes. Whatever those shoes may differ, but we generally give them shoes. You don't usually have shoes in martial arts.
So
cheap difference.
Yeah, I mean, is that difference? Is that the art? Is that whether or not beauty is whether or not aesthetics is a core component, or where's that line?
The thing is that, we still it is about language and naming things, and I don't want to come off as an expert in things like this. And this is sort of my controversial opinion in this field, which is that I think that any time where you focus on control of the body, it is considered a martial art, because of the definition of the word. We still use words like martial law, right? Which would brings to mind the true definition of martial art. But the art of war and arts and things like that have different meanings over time. And again, that's where you can't group things in. The word martial art is for us to use in English. It can't really be used. Gong fu does not translate to martial arts. It translates to gong fu, to kung fu. Like it doesn't translate to martial arts. There's a different word for it. So you can't say karate is martial arts. It's karate. You can't say hapkido is martial arts. It's hapkido. There's no translation, which is, I think, where martial arts comes in as an important language thing, like you're saying. Is like there is no translation for hapkido.
But so there is no fighting game thought. There is Tekken thought. Is that an appropriate analogy?
Yeah. You can't use the moves that you use in Tekken in another game.
So I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, just because I got a controller to be able to play games on my computer, and so I've been using like a couple different games on it, and now I just nice. I mean, it's an Xbox controller. It's what's most compatible with my Mac according to the internet, and I want to use it to test Ultimate Dungeon Cleaner, which we haven't talked about. But to make sure it supports gamepads. But I'm remembering it's like learning two languages at the same time, where I keep forgetting the configuration that I'm using, and I keep pressing buttons from the other game, and it's very frustrating. But it's all about that, like the muscle memory and the stuff bleeding over.
There's a lot of disgusting ableist stuff in the world of martial arts that I think that I want to like launch a little into the idea of this, is like in terms of video game stuff, which is like to say that there's lots of people who will claim they can cure your genetic ailments using their martial art techniques. And it's like, well, if you can't, which you probably can't, then my ability to do it is my ability to do it. And so there is a certain thing here in opening up the word martial arts to be more things, to say that, yes, someone in this condition or with this, movement range or whatever, they can do martial arts. And so that's like important to me to be like, yeah, like in the days where this came from like war, there's that scene in 300 where it's like, you need to be able, every Spartan has to be able to cover each other from neck to thigh. And, like, that's obviously fiction, but it echoes something that I feel in life, which is like, there is no one shape of martial artist, And I think that that's important to like qualify the idea of like you're talking about with the controller and how it feels different is, that's something in the physical realm that you're having to control. And just because it's your fingers, tons of martial arts focus on fingers. I have been scolded by many martial arts teachers about the relaxedness of my grandpa used to tell me all the time, this wrist angle and this wrist angle and exactly where to do it. I mean, these subtle movements are important. And so to say that you have to have the leg movements and all these different things is excluding people. It's going to exclude people. So it's like, open it up to video games. It is a video game. You did have a physical issue playing one game on one controller versus another, So is there a game that you like being a spectator of the most? Is there something, if we're opening up games to be arts or to be a fighter, but choose your fighter here. What's your destiny? I don't like fighting video games because of this, because I want lessons, because I'm like strict about this kind of stuff and I don't feel an adept. I don't really like watching games unless I'm watching for the story, which is different. I think that it's experiential and it has to do with puzzle solving. It's that type of art. It's an experiential art. You can't do it unless you experience it. And so it's like, for me, I would not play a fighting game unless someone gave me lessons. I would not watch a video game unless I was watching for the story. I think you have to be there, put hands on a hard body, and like play it to whatever extent you can, and that's your experience. Like here's one that I talked about in this other podcast about video games, which I know this is not. It's about spirituality, and I have a bad
and
attitude.
Video games, and video games. That's the new season. We're injecting it.
Yeah. So I have a weird philosophical attitude towards art, which is like really being there and like understanding it from the origins and all that stuff. And like, like people will say Castlevania, they'll be like, oh man, it's the clock tower. I've never been to the goddamn clock tower. Want to know why? Because it's a hard game. Okay. I have just seen the start of the clock tower. Okay. So for years I'm playing Castlevania and I've never seen the clock tower, but know it from other people. So if I can't get there, it's not a part of the game in my experience. So like, I don't have a favorite thing to watch because I'm only going to watch stuff for the story, because that's the only thing you can get outside of that. And that's why we have streaming, because it's like, you're there for the personality. There are people that like watching gameplay, but
yeah, I don't agree with you there. I have watched some streaming gameplay for like I was like I used to play high school football, and now I watch the NFL or whatever. Like I never played football, but like I was watching some StarCraft, some Pro StarCraft for a while, and I was watching some Hearthstone, all Blizzard games, because that's what I
watched League of Legends for a while, and I've never played that game. But like I have this weird philosophy where I need to have not played it in order to enjoy it in watching it.
And well, okay, but so also for the Let's Plays, though, for narrative stuff, like you were talking about Firewatch, and I started watching a guy playing that on YouTube recently, and I was like, oh, this is great.
Get your hands on it. Like that game is like, I think that there's you need to, like, I don't want to spoil Firewatch, but did you watch all of it?
Not all of it. No, I watched like 2 hours of it or something. It looked really cool. It's beautiful.
Can we spoil it? Is that weird to spoil it?
I don't know. Spoilers. Turn off the podcast if you don't want spoilers.
No, because then it's like, oh, then they're going to turn it off. You know
turn the podcast back on. Turn it off. Turn it back on. Okay.
No, keep it back on. Keep it. And there's something on the stove. Go check that. Yeah, but anyway, to answer your question, like, yeah, competitive play is obviously different, but like, I have this weird philosophy towards it being an experiential thing, and more like what we talked about on Hashtag Cole, I am pushed very much against the social element of games. I'm very much against the idea that in order to enjoy it, I have to be watching other people play. I have to play with other people. I don't think multiplayer is a genre you have to get into in order to understand games. And like, that's the thing I'm pushing against, which is it can be this alone intrinsic experience and conversation between you and a puzzle that doesn't, no one watches each other. I'm sure they do, but no one's like, man, I want to see how Ted Puzzle Guy does this jigsaw puzzle. You know what I mean? It's an alone experience, and the experience isn't robbed by not seeing other people or talking about jigsaws or going to jigsaw conventions.
I don't know.
What's your favorite?
Jigsaw 2020. It's going to be pretty big.
Mine are the ones that look like stars. They don't have 4 eyes. They're 5.
Well, I'm going as an end piece this year. No, this is why I wanted to talk, actually, to you, because I heard you talking about this, and I have a very similar relationship to video games, I think. I was always around social video game play, but not trying to say woe is me, but from like a class perspective.
Why? Say woe is me. Who cares?
Because I had the money, but like my family had the money, but I never had the computer that could play the same games everyone else was playing. And so, like, it was weird. I feel like I had this.
Give a relative woe, Alex. We can give a relative woe as me. It's definitely you and you having some woe. It doesn't have to be like the end of the world to have a little bit of woe.
It's
Alex.
A second cousin of woe. It's just a little relative woe.
Yeah, it's a side helping of woe. God, we're not saying you have to lift the biggest woe. Just take a woe. Like, self-care here a little.
So that's how I think we came to a similar perspective on some of these more sort of solitary, maybe a little bit more bespoke, boutique kind of game experiences. Some of it's playing, at least in my experience, some of it is playing older games that just have been left by the wayside. I know I have really enjoyed looking at archives and like even when it was back in the day, I used to have these shareware just like compilations of games, and just be like 15 different DOS fantasy games that I would check out, and there is a community for this stuff. But I do want to push back a little bit. I don't really think there's a question here, just kind of spewing some stuff, but I do want to push back on the idea that like no one wants to watch someone do a jigsaw puzzle, because I do think the internet has revealed to us that there are some of those people. In some ways, the
experience of doing a jigsaw is not defined by other people in a culture. And I think that there's this pushback that because it exists and because people are profiting off of it, which I believe is the main reason it exists, people are profiting off of you sharing your stories and being on Twitter and talking to other gamers about it and watching other people game. There's this push to be like, that's an important element of the culture. And whenever video game culture gets talked about, watching, streaming, and all these things come up. And it's true, a lot of people do that. I don't think there's enough pushback to be like, that doesn't matter. I can play games and and there's people like us out there who don't really speak up, who are like, yeah, I don't want to play with you. I want to play. Mm-hmm. I don't want to talk about games. I want to play games, And I honestly think that coming from an athletic background in high school and in my life, like that's where the pushback comes from. I don't like watching hockey as much as I like playing hockey. It's not even close. It doesn't even compare. I could play a pickup game of basketball with you much before I would watch a game, and I don't even like basketball. It's this thing where the experiential people are not able to speak up and be like, no, I don't like that. I don't have to like both. That's the pushback I'm talking about.
Yeah, well, it goes to this idea of the culture being a monolith or not, kind of like when I was talking about martial arts as a monolith, and that's very much not the case. And it's the same thing with video games. But there is this, video games have penetrated pop culture and mainstream culture in a way that has never before really happened, I think. Well, maybe that's not true. I feel like maybe it used to be more normal when we were kids. And then we were supposed to grow out of it or something. But now...
Fever would probably be the only time that it invaded so much.
What's that?
Pac-Man Fever?
That's literally what I was thinking of, because I just started watching that High Score documentary on Netflix, which was like... But it's about that. It's like, what were the most popular entries of video games into the culture? And that's definitely a story, but it's like looking at music history as only the history of the Grammys also.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was just saying another time where it was as injected into our culture as it is now, which I don't think it is. There's stadiums when you're not in these Corona times filled with people, watching a video. I don't think that's ever happened before in the world of even interactive media.
Yeah. No, well, there was in the Netflix show that I was watching, like they had a Pac-Man World or U.S. Championship, and it shows that there were these spaces where people were gathering to celebrate games. That it's not like a completely novel, modern thing.
Well, I'll say this a different way. Like I did a documentary about Richard Bartle, the inventor of Mud, the first online computer game, and when he was talking, they invented every element. As soon as online gaming became a thing, within months, they invented every element of online gaming that you know today. They had tournaments, they had forums, they spoke to each other, they had friend lists, they had events, they had specials, they had DLCs, they had skins, they had different rules. This was all within months of 1966, I want to say. 1960, wow. Yeah.
That's so early.
Mm-hmm. They had all of that stuff in the 1960s. I have the exact date. I made a documentary about it. I should have remembered. But they had it all right from the start. What I mean is like that was contained on one campus, or that was contained on AOL. They filled a arena in Brooklyn, Alex, with people playing League of Legends. It is a different scale. I think there's this thing with gaming where it's like the resistance on older gamers be like, oh, this has always been around. It's like, not really, though.
Yeah.
If I asked someone in 1960, do you know about video game tournaments? They'd be like, no. Like, what's a video game? What's a video game tournament?
I think there's still a lot of that trauma that we are still processing. You know, it's so much of the modern, all the stuff I used to, all the stuff that I used to be, I used to think of myself as an outcast for liking is now modern, is popular, and all that trope, which is not helpful, but I do think it's something that people gotta process it.
Yeah. And I think with nerd culture in general, and like finding a philosophy is that's not your identity. Like, games really shouldn't be someone's identity unless you and this is part of hashtag cult as well, is like, I would resist anyone to say that a cultural thing is important to you. I think that that's probably an unhealthy way of looking at art. If you create something in culture, that should be important to you. But, you know, to say that you are a Star Wars person is an unhealthy idea. I think that you're always going to have an unhealthy attitude towards other people and their relationship with it if it somehow is more important to you than other people. Because then you set yourself up in sort of isolating and, you know, I don't want to use the word cult-like, but I would say zealot-like thinking, which is to say, like, it's most important to me, which a part of your identity should be. You know, if it's really a part of your identity, it's most important to you. And if you have something so popular, you're only going to be upset by other people's relationships to it. You will only find people who just somehow walk the line in keeping it most important to you. And I think with nerd culture, it's this thing where it's like, it's both being incorporated everywhere and not incorporated everywhere. The fact is that, like, people can say they like games, but not everyone is playing them the same way. Not everyone is feeling the same way about it, and it is unique to you. Star Wars is a great example. Like, Star Wars always was really popular. It sold millions of dollars. That's the reason that, like, it's popular.
Right.
But were there always dorks constantly talking about Star Wars? Yes. That's a much smaller population. Even still to this day, that's a much smaller population of Star Wars fans. So that fandom and that uniqueness of, like, your zealotry for it is never taken away, and yet at the same time, I don't necessarily think it's healthy in a lot of ways.
It's interesting you went to Star Wars, because the analogy I was going to make was I started thinking about Beatlemania. And I mean, any kind of pop culture identity is problematic in some ways, or just like, I mean, it feels very natural that we're all supposed to define ourselves by the different posters that we would put up on our walls or whatever, and that's your personality for some reason. Definitely feels like it's more the consumerism.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's at the same time though, having a muse from some kind of medium, some media is a pretty normal thing of wanting to say, you know, these are the artists that speak to me. But it is interesting that that the game developers are not the ones that anyone ever talks about, except for maybe Miyamoto. I feel like he is the one, and the Metal Gear guy. I forget his name. I'm blanking on that now.
Yeah. I'm going to say the one that I like, because everyone doesn't like him. Phil Fish is another one that people talk about.
Oh my God! Wait, can we talk about Phil Fish? And then after that, we'll have to transition into card time. But yeah, Phil Fish. I mean, he fell apart. He's the one solo dev from Indie Game the Movie, right? Everyone else was in a team, right?
There's another guy working with him, but Phil Fish is obviously the louder of the two. But he's sort of solo. There's someone else there with him. He's mostly solo, though.
So if you don't know who he is, he's the guy who made Fez, and if you haven't heard of that, it's an indie video game.
I want to talk to Phil Fish, and I want to talk to him about the project I'm doing now, and I'm putting these feelers out there to try and reach him. I think Phil Fish was bullied on the internet for nothing. I think Phil Fish was sort of pushed to the... I mean, Phil Fish is like a good dude. He's never really done anything. And
What's the story?
Every clip that people play, it's a little bit of like... it's just old video game culture that people like hating, and then this story got out there, and so instead of understanding that there's always trash talkers in the world of video games, like, people decided this was important. Every clip that people play, like, oh, he did this thing bad, it's like, well, go back or go forward 15 seconds into that clip. You know, the one that I always think about is, like, people go, I hate games from Japan. I don't like the UI. And the guy asks him, are you inspired by Japanese games in modern day? That's the question. And he goes, no, I hate them. And the era of games he's talking about is the Wii and DS, which is the most hated era on the internet. So it's like Phil Fish gets like called like, oh, whatever, you're just being mean to this Japanese guy. It's like everyone in the world is hating on the Wii and hating on the DS for the stylus and the interactivity. And yet he's the one voice being like, no, I don't like your UI. I don't like how it's going nowadays. You guys need to make it less complicated. And that's a valid criticism of the DS and the Wii. And I think that the internet plays these clips in order to be like, well, oh, look at it, what a bad guy this guy is. He made it a brilliant game. He made a really brilliant game. And like, I think that who you are and what you watch and whatever being a part of your personality leads to something like that not sounding horrible. It leads to judging his character in an interview where he's asked a legitimate question, like to be like, oh, he's a bad dude. I think it's the other end of the spectrum of hashtag cult where these people are putting things out to the internet with no responsibility. And they're just like, well, I can say hateful stuff and it doesn't matter if it creates more hate in other people. And it doesn't matter that I'm indoctrinating people. And it doesn't matter that I'm creating more of a problem. The other end of that spectrum is the effect of like, well, I see something and it's just an interview. And now I've decided that person's character. And now I know who they are as a person, when neither is the real way to live in the world. You know?
Yeah, and it's also this weird thing where it's like you see a piece of art, a video game, as like being something that cannot be criticized, or even of being so mad at him because Phil Fish was mean to your precious Wii games, and I'm still just kind of processing that because I've been playing a lot of Wii, and I just want to say I want to agree. The UI is terrible. There's a lot of transparency. I feel like I got a lot of ideas from it that then gave me earned a lot of criticism from people. Like the UI is bad.
Yeah, and like for example, like I know this is a system UI, but like in order to play GameCube, you have to pick up a Wiimote, go to the GameCube setting, click the GameCube game, and then pick up your other controller. Like, that's a bad idea. Like, there's lots of games that use motion control that don't work. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm really drawn to games on the Wii that don't involve motion control. But like, I think Phil Fish was a good dude. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if he's a good dude or a bad dude. I think that the hate for Phil Fish makes zero sense.
Yeah, all I heard was that there was just this explosion, and then he said he hated gamers, and then he went into the woods forever or something.
He said he hated PC people who were at the time jerks. Like, PC people were owning the fact that they were jerks. They called themselves the master race, which is kind of a Nazi reference. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't really have a problem with that era of, not nowadays where we have a lot, gaming culture has calmed down in a lot of ways, but like the era of people saying the master race and like PC gamers and all those different things, like you can admit that generally calling PC gamers sort of gross in that era was not really a hot take. And then he got hate from these people who are scapegoating something into the internet.
It's that same thing, though, where there's a culture that's arising out of, like, there's a culture that's arising because there's a space, and people are playing these games, and people are talking about this stuff, and there isn't a philosophical framework that's guiding it. It's just people just colliding into each other.
Well, I would push against that from my findings in hashtag cult, which I'll talk about for a second here so we don't have to do like a fake plug. Essentially, I've been investigating a cult that operates on the internet, and we found that a lot of what they do is they coerce young men into their group and kind of bully them in order to change their worldview. And we found a lot of the trolling, quote unquote, it's not really trolling for comedy's sake. When you see that real hate stuff, what it is trolling in order to indoctrinate or signal to other members of the cult or to create more confirmation bias in their head. So when it comes to Phil Fish, the reason I have a now emboldened view on this stuff is like, why was someone, I don't comment on the internet. I don't know a lot of people who comment so much on the internet. What compels someone to go out and write a screed about Phil Fish into Twitter, or to keep responding on Twitter, or to keep doing this stuff? What compels them? Is it something else in their life that is causing trauma? Is there some other trauma that's untreated and it's okay to bully this person? And that's been our findings. And it's like, to me, I think Phil Fish is just a victim of being bullied, and now he's not on the internet. And now, like, a creator, this space, which was supposed to be like, you can connect with your favorite people in the world. Like, I don't even know how to reach Phil Fish. Like, I literally, if I want him in this documentary, I just have to be on a show like this and mention him. And hopefully someone is like, I know Phil Fish. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yes, you have to. The only true mechanism now is you have to get a vision board and put Phil Fish's face on it.
But do you know what I haven't tried? I haven't tried turning my camera angle of my face 300. There he is. Phil Fish was a transparent line in my room the whole time. He was the blinds. I didn't turn. That's a Fez joke, everyone. It's okay.
Ah, yes. Just a change of dimension. That's all it took. Yeah, Fez, I mean, it's kind of interesting because it was about taking, if you're not familiar with the game, it's about a 2D world, but then you can actually there's a third dimension. You can suddenly shift the camera and there's this whole hidden world that you couldn't see before. Which is, I mean, it's definitely a concept that owes a lot to old eras of gaming and shows a love for it, and I thought it was really cool. I never played it. Did you play Fez?
Oh, yeah, I almost beat Fez.
Is it hard?
I love it. Yeah, it's a hard game. It'll kick your butt, but you should play it. It's a great game. There's no denying it's a great game, and definitely then, like, the building off of that. I didn't like Paper Mario, but, like, Link Between Worlds was definitely inspired by Fez to some extent, and that was one of my favorite Zelda games. You know, I think it's a revolutionary game.
But there is this idea on the internet, especially, that you can police how people play games. I definitely agree that is a problem. I just the other day saw someone tweeted with the game dev, or I forget if it was game dev or indie game dev hashtag, and the tweet was just, "Your games are really buggy, and no one's going to want to play them. Quit now."
Now,
like,
is that a parody account? Because I do follow a parody account that talks about that.
Really? I had no idea. There was no context. There was no reply. Maybe that's a parody, but it definitely it felt like I was at a basement open mic all over again.
This is what I'm trying to say. Go back to those basement open mics. Someone goes on stage and they're a miserable person and they say all this miserable stuff. You know, there's the context for that. Why the open mic scene in any city is failure, and hopefully it will be gotten rid of because of COVID, is because it is all about personality, and no one is booking based on talent on the stage. And the fact is that someone has a miserable personality and says all those stuff. In the open mic scene, that's closer to what I want the idea to be on the internet. You saw that comment, you didn't look into it. Why are we not? We say all these things. We're like trolls. And I'll say this about trolls. I'll say this when people say negative things about feminists. I'll say it when people say negative things about social justice warriors. I'll say it when people say negative things about any group. Which ones? You don't like young people? Which young person? You don't like social justice warriors? Who? You don't like trolls? Which troll? And we have no ability to be like, oh, people were making comments. What people? Mm-hmm. Why were they making those comments? Do they make up? Is their whole point of their life to make these comments? Are you clicking and seeing who they are? And there needs to be more investigation into, like, where are those comments coming from? Which Twitter? Twitter is saying, who on Twitter? Every single Twitter idea originates from a single tweet. And there are tweets from random accounts that blow up randomly. And then that becomes an internet trend. And if you don't track that stuff, then it's like, well, it's just random. It's just the ethos. It's like we have I think the newest religious idea that's going on is that now there is a factual belief in the ether, in the zeitgeist. We now believe the zeitgeist is a real thing and that the collective unconscious is a real thing, instead of being like, people on Twitter, who? Wait, no, who? Oh, well, people like, I don't know, left-wing people. Okay, who?
The holy Twitter spirit.
Like, exactly. That's a belief that everyone has walking around being like, Twitter has said it to us. The Twitter is ripping itself apart. We must unite it. It's like, who's saying it? It's individual accounts. Do you know what I mean?
I think part of the issue is that we do recognize that there are these bubbles, and there's a lot of anxiety around this idea that people are talking and we are not privy to their conversations. That's my personal belief.
Yeah, and I know you know from listening to Hashtag Cult, is like, it's been a real struggle of patience convincing people this is a cult. MGTOW, MGTOW is a cult. because they're using things like, you say all these words like there's bubbles, there's private spaces, there's all these people that can congregate and communicate secretly on the internet just about like Legacy of Kain, and then but like that's not a cult. But if you use those same methodology, you can obviously establish a cult on the internet, which is happening. And it's been difficult to explain to people, you're saying all these things are true about the internet, and then you're trying to say, but it's not a cult. And it's like, it's really been as a journalist, I can have a little bit more patience because I'm not like working in the field of mental health. I'm making a movie about it. I'm making a podcast about it. But if I was working in the field of mental health, I'd be very frustrated by the pushback from the public to say that you can't create a cult on a hashtag. And now as we started this investigation, almost everyone agrees with us. And we are changing the landscape. You're seeing more articles since we started this, many months ago. You're now seeing articles coming out about MGTOW, about secretly operating, about coercive relationships on the internet. We are making a difference.
I mean, even outside of the internet, I'm thinking of the cults that I have been exposed to, or cult media I've been exposed to recently. I'm thinking about Nexium and their documentary. I'm thinking about the coverage about People of Praise, the group that Amy Coney Barrett is a member of. And both of these two groups specifically use a very similar kind of pod mechanism where they have people reporting to people, and that's all over electronic communication. It's through text messaging mostly, and so I mean that's still more of an IRL cult if there's a significant difference. But
no, there is, because hashtag cults operate secretly. Hashtag cults operate using like a version of coded handshakes, like you see with the Freemasons and things like that.
These IRL cults also use secrecy, though.
Well, but they don't use secrecy to operate in plain sight. And not saying that Freemasons or whatever, I don't care about Freemasons, but I'm saying secret handshakes. So the point is that if I text you, I'm communicating with you. Mm-hmm. If I secretly text you, almost every text you've never seen my text. Every text I send is secret to you. The point is that if I text you like, hey, this member of our cult is being a jerk, we should probably yell at them and make them more subservient. Mm-hmm. It's about the cult. If I use hashtag MGTOW and I'm talking about this, or if I use coded language like hypergamy, which they've co-opted, if I use AWALT, AWALT, if I use any of those terms, I can have that conversation right in front of you. And then they bleed into the real world. And that's how they groom people via SEO and all these different things. They groom questions. Why did my girlfriend break up with me? Is this person a cuckold? Whatever it may be. My wife is terrible. They groom subjects on the internet, which is different. The idea of cultivating ideas and patterns on the internet is totally new to the hashtag cult. That's the main difference, is that you may see Chad or Stacy as one that I see all the time. And it bleeds into other people's stuff. And you're like, what's a Chad or a Stacy? And then people look that up. And then they get into Red Pill. Some of those people may then be persuade to get into a Red Pill cult. That's how they do it. That's the main difference, is they're secretly out in the open. The only thing that I think is equivalent in real cults is when they operate other businesses.
When they have a front.
Some cults have restaurants or have, rehab centers and things like that.
Or like classes.
Classes, free classes and stuff like that. That's the equivalent on the internet, but they're doing it with single words. They're doing it with trends on the internet. Unknowingly, by the way. They don't know they're doing this. They're just typing because they're upset.
Well, and going back to the top of the show, talking about Kabbalah and naming, I mean, this is the magical power they're tapping into is by creating new names that have the significance that you can then say in front of people because they don't know what they are.
Why is MGTOW even a word? Is because incel and pickup artist have all failed before it. It was first pickup artist, then it was incel, then it was red pill, now it's MGTOW. It is about hiding. It's about hiding, and that power of naming helps.
That's interesting. I feel like we could go even deeper into that, but I want to make sure there's time for a reading. Yeah. So let's.
Some tarot.
What's that?
I want to do some tarot.
Yes,
some tarot.
The old tarot. So I've got several decks in front of me. Did you want to stick with the mythic deck, Mike?
Yes, please.
All right. So I'm going to unveil, this beautiful mythic tarot set from the 70s.
Is that why you asked me beforehand which one, so that you could pick up the the canvas alluringly?
It's just that's the only one that I have. Like it came in this nice little wrap that's got like
No,
place
you
marks
should
on it.
wrap whichever one the guest is going to use, and then every time be like, "La-la-la."
Yeah, no, that's canon now. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I will give you 3 cards to answer a single question.
Now, yeah, I have certain beliefs about tarot and all those things, so that will factor into my question.
Okay. Do you want to talk about those while I'm shuffling?
Yeah. Obviously, there is no scientific evidence for psychics at all. I have a big problem with the psychic scam in America. To explain, I was on a British podcast, and I explained in almost every town there is a psychic with a storefront, like with the money to be able to afford a physical store. And that's crazy as someone who I am an independent worker, and that's crazy to me that someone has a storefront.
There's so many.
Yeah, it's in every town. The person couldn't believe it. And for me, I think that that's a cultural thing that needs to be pointed out about America. I don't think that they're doing psychic stuff. I think they culturally appropriate from almost everyone with no consequence. And I think a lot of them are scam artists. Some are probably well-intentioned, and I don't believe in it at all. Now, since then, here's the other part of it. Magic logic between me and you. In a world where there is magic, I have magic too. So I have since discovered, that was the old me. I used to think, oh, geez, this stuff is not real because there's no scientific evidence. And I tried to have telekinesis, and maybe I'm not practicing enough, whatever it may be. I still want my X-Men powers. I'm still waiting, Charles Xavier, you promised. But since then, I have discovered my X-Men powers. I am the world's most popular anti-psychic. And the main reason I know no psychic abilities are real is because my anti-psychic power is so powerful that until I am destroyed, no psychic on the planet can have a correct psychic reading. So if you try and do a reading today, you will get a false reading.
That is fascinating. When did you discover these anti-psychic powers?
About 2 years ago, I discovered that if I just sort of, I would be around psychics, and it was from experience. I would be around psychics, and they'd get everything wrong, like all the fucking time, and they were just wrong about everything and saying general shit. And I was like, man, they must not be functioning around me. So what does that mean? I got it. I must be an energy that they can't be psychic around me, and I'm able to destroy psychic predictions and clairvoyance. Now, tarot, I learned about hoodoo, which is really interesting and does have its origins in like real religions. So I don't want to be insulting to anything that's a part of real religions. But at the same time, there are no such thing as psychics or clairvoyance, or what were the ones that they used in like Greek times where they would put the little girls on opium?
Oracles?
Oracles, yes. You don't see a lot of oracle stores, do you? So my point is that the reason all of those aren't working is I'm sure you believe in them. It's fine. It's because of my anti-psychic power. So I'd be impressed to see if you can rival my anti-psychic power today.
Well, so yeah, I don't know if we've talked about this. I mean, we did talk about tarot cards as when we first met many years ago. You gave me a book about Miss Cleo, and I read it.
The tape. I gave you the set on her tape.
Yeah,
I don't know that I gave you the actual tape. I know I gave you the casing for it. I think.
There was like a small book of some kind.
Okay, yeah.
It was short, and it had a little picture in it. Honestly, I couldn't remember. I couldn't tell you what was in it.
It's like how to do tarot, I think. Something.
Yeah. And my heart goes out to people who give up their money because they need an injection of spiritualism from an outside source. I came to tarot from the magician's tradition of the buster, also of sort of the Houdini tradition of outing spiritualists for using magical techniques to get money from people and to say that their stuff is real. So as sort of the skeptic tarot reader, I don't know if anyone else claims that title. I don't believe that any of this is real, and yet it does not have to be real to work, is what I've discovered. Because I think it's for me, what tarot is about is much more psychological. It goes into I need to read more Jung, because I know that it's connected, but I don't really understand the details of it. But for me, what's interesting is basically taking a set of prompts and seeing what kind of associations your mind goes to, and unlocking that inner power. But anyway, so I've been shuffling the cards. Well, we've been talking about this a little bit, and we'll see if your anti-psychic energy is able to fully pervade through the internet here.
Let's be clear here. If you just said that it's false, so if it is false again, my anti-psychic, I am the world's most powerful anti-psychic.
You'll make it true? Is that what you're saying?
I am, yeah. It will make it wrong. It will still make it wrong. My anti-psychic power is the only proven psychic ability on the world, and I think now we're going to get it on video. So this should be, if this is horse shit, like my anti-psychic power is working amazingly.
Yeah, okay. We'll have to test for the intensity of it. But so give me 3 numbers, Mike. What are the first 3 numbers that pop into your mind?
7, 24, and 32.
Okay, great. So first I'm going to deal 7 cards for the first one.
Oh, God, you don't have to deal 32, do you?
And then, I should have asked. What's your question?
My question is there a more powerful anti-psychic out there than me?
Okay.
Is that a bad? I think you're supposed to ask more lifelike questions, right?
No.
You're supposed to ask.
Look, it's whatever
Yes
you
or no.
need to know. What is important?
How about this? Will my anti-psychic power be recognized by the world someday? Or how will my anti-psychic power be recognized by the world?
Yeah. So we had 7, 23. Was that the next number?
24.
24.
32.
And then 32.
Do you have to deal 32 cards, or what's the number?
No, what I did is I dealt. I started at 1, and then I dealt up to 7, and then I dealt up to 24 in the second pack. But I kept the number that I was at. So I've got 3 piles of cards here. Cool. They're each about maybe a 1/4 inch thick, a little bit less. I've been playing. I think if I had to subscribe to a style of real magic, I am a chaos magician. This is all through practice, and there isn't particularly like a single school that is guiding it. I'm purposefully choosing not to think too hard about it. Also, that's how the magic works. So the first card is going to be your past position. Then we've got the present position, and your future. We've got everything here. So I'm sorry. The question was, what will the world know of your anti-psychic? How
will the world view my anti-psychic abilities? Will they recognize it? Will they shame me? Will I be an outcast because of my great and powerful? I mean, no psychic in the world has been correct. It's been pretty crazy since then. So
yeah, doesn't the amazing Randy still have like a $10,000 or $1 million prize for anyone who can prove psychic abilities?
Yeah, there are tons of skeptics foundations that do this. So I do think I should enter because I am an anti-psychic. And the reason all those people have been failing is because of me. Yeah.
So in the past position, we have the 8 of Swords here, which I'm going to try and hold this as still as possible. Could you describe a little bit of what you see on the card here, Mike?
There seems to be 3 women or 3 Medusa-like haired women, possibly Gorgons. I know that sometimes that's what I've gotten from Castlevania. I think there's 3 Gorgons in robes, a small boy, and then what looks like God looking down upon them. Maybe Zeus. I see some weirdness there. Or maybe that's a helmet. Could be Hermes. And then the small boy or small person, maybe a woman, can't tell, is surrounded by swords, 8 swords.
Yeah, so the 8 of Swords, in this deck, the different suits are connected to different Greek myths. So the swords are the story of Orestes. And I don't know too much of this, but it's interesting. Here it says...
that once a year, as men, we're supposed to check our Orestes to see if there's any loss.
He is a cursed person whose whole family was cursed. But the 8 of Swords portrays a situation of bondage through fear. You know, you've got these powers in the past. You can't use them out of fear that perhaps, you are draining the world. Well, no, I don't know what the fears.
Sentinels is my main concern, is because, I've seen other, much more powerful mutants, Cyclops get taken by them, and it's just like, whoa.
So
that does connect with me a lot.
Yeah. On a divinatory level, the Eight of Swords heralds a situation where the individual is unable to act because his or her fear of the consequences. A decision is necessary, but either choice will lead to trouble. So you're here, you've got the power, but you can't use it.
Yeah.
You don't know what to do. Now, here we are in the present, and I'm drawing the Nine of Pentacles. What do you see there, Mike?
We'll wait for the lag to catch up. I see what looks like a person wearing possibly a cassock in a garden, and they are stacking up several, like Connect Four. They have several coins of pentacles, sort of stacked up in a field near a lake. So it's lakefront property, and there's uvas along the edge. There are some uvas all along the edge in a vine. So hold on, about the uvas, is that who's the guy? Dionysus?
It's portraying Daedalus in. And then the last card that was Apollo.
Okay. This is Daedalus. Daedalus is the inventor, correct?
Yes. Yeah, he's the inventor, and in the beginning of his story, we have him escaping with the wax wings from an island, and then in the middle of the story, before this, in like the 6 and 7s, he builds the labyrinth for the Minotaur in Crete. Mm-hmm. And that was like a big decision for him. He was like, I have to choose between, do I work for Poseidon or do I work for the king? Like, I have to choose between God and country. And he chooses Poseidon, makes that place for Poseidon to allow the king of Minos's wife to make a minotaur by having sex with the bull. Greek mythology is great, right? But so the end of the story, though, it's pentacles are about wealth, swords are about ideas, pentacles about earth as an element. So on a divinatory level, the Eight of Pentacles augurs a period where the individual plays the role of the hardworking apprentice who's struggling to acquire new skill. The card suggests a talent which the individual has recently discovered and which is worthy of development.
Okay.
So we have here, you've got the power, but the swords, you're too afraid,
I felt my ASDs. Now I'm going to check my pentacles.
That brings us to one last card. Are we ready? Here it is. The final card is, you called him by name before, and now he's here, the Emperor.
I did call him by
name? So in this particular deck, the Emperor is definitely Zeus.
Okay. He has a golden pheasant on his shoulder. I didn't know, is that something or is it an eagle or a hawk? What's on the... I know what the lightning is, and obviously Earth makes sense. There's like an eagle or a hawk on him.
Yeah, I'm pulling up my copy of the text real quick. I was just trying to get to the major arcana. I mean, this is very big here. You've got two minor arcana cards, an 8 and a 9, slight movement towards the end of the minor arcana, and then boom, in the future you jump all the way up to the major arcana. I mean, that's that's an explosive pattern. I have Empress.
So you're saying I checked out my Aestes and my pentacles, and now there's been an explosive pattern.
I mean, it's just the pentacles.
My pentacles sometimes cause an explosive pattern. It's fine.
So I wanted to look at the pheasant or whatever. So come on, book. Oh my goodness, why is this so hard to use? I see the lightning bolt in here. I see the eagle. The eagle on the shoulder. Is that what you were thinking was a pheasant?
Yeah. What is that?
The eagle is Zeus's emblem because of its keen sight and power to fly higher than other birds, according to this book. As a bird of prey, it also expresses...
I love that. They have no goddamn idea. It flies higher than other birds. You don't know.
Yeah. As a bird of prey, it also expresses the aggression and conquering instinct of the god. I mean, this is... I am not a Greek mythology expert here. I would love to get a Greek mythology expert on the show.
Really? I can make that. I think we could find that.
Yeah? Man, I would love to have a conversation, especially with this deck. Because there's so much just below the surface, and I have some framework of Greek mythology, but not like that full training. But yeah, I was just trying to scan this to see if they talked about the eagle anywhere else, and they don't. But I mean, this is very clear that you are going to have, to me, an Akira-like explosive growth of your anti-psychic energy until you actually destroy all psychic energy on the planet.
Wow, so that's probably what's going to happen, yeah.
Yeah, and achieve a Zeus-like dominion over all spirituality.
All psychicness, just to be clear. Not spirituality. I don't claim anything over the spiritual. Just this one pseudoscientific claim. Yeah.
Well, yeah. What is the line between psychic and magic and spiritualism? I don't know. It depends on what genre.
I asked legendary cult expert Rick Ross that. And Rick gave a very interesting answer, which I'm struggling to understand, but to recall, I mean. But his thinking was simply that it's contextual. But in terms of manipulating people, he'd say they have no distinction. In terms of creating a cult, the pseudoscientific and the supernatural, someone willing to portray such information to you in a cult, that type of information holds the same place. So that's something to think about in terms of coercive relationships. The pseudoscientific, fake scientific fact, and the supernatural claim of a person or someone's abilities hold the same power in manipulating those around you in cultic relationships.
Yeah, so. I think the takeaway from today is if you see or hear of someone claiming to have real psychic powers, real, intense magical powers in some case, it is your duty to develop your anti-psychic, anti-magical powers and stop them, right?
Oh, yeah, let's go a step further. I will accept large sums of money to teach you how to be an anti-psychic. I have not passed my gift on yet, but I feel as though I'm ready. Maybe that's that Zeus-like ability. Mm-hmm. I am happy to teach lessons in anti-psychicism. For the low fee of a second-born. Get all the kinks out in the first one, I feel like. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Please send your firstborns to the email address at the end of the show. We'll let you know where to send your firstborns if you do want to study anti-psychic training. Thank you so much for being here, Mike. This is when I'm thanking you again on the air.
Doesn't count if it's off.
I thanked you before. It didn't count then. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate your time. We went a little long today, but there's just so much to talk about. Before we go, what should our listeners know? Where can they check out your stuff?
So I'm trying to sort of shift how we do this. I generally don't do plug, but we're doing something to kind of change the world. MGTOWisACult.com. That's our website. You can go to #cult.org. But MGTOWisACult.com. If you want to participate in kind of changing the internet and seeing how we can do this, contact me through MGTOWisACult.com, and we'll do something where you can be a part of this documentary that we're making in some way. We want to run this experiment where we have people post MGTOWisACult.com on their social media and see the reactions to it. Because it is a cult, and we do know people in this cult. They are thousands of members large. Thousands.
Well, I definitely want to give that a try. That sounds really interesting. I definitely want to find out more about this. Thank you again, Mike, and for everyone listening, we'll see you next time. For more episodes of Great Question or more information about my upcoming game, Ultimate Dungeon Cleaner, go to www.sodabags.com.